Hey there everyone, Carlo here from All You Can Board, and as always I'm here with my cousin Dylan. We are in the middle of our top 50 games of all time. It's the first time we've ever done this on our channel. If you missed 50 through 41, go check that out before getting into here. Link above. If you want to know our criteria, some background about how we picked our games, that kind of stuff, go back to the first video. Otherwise, before we jump in, I'm just going to mention we've got double spice chai left over from the last video, and we're going to be adding either one snack or drink to every video of this. Right now, we've got some caramel bites. I wanted to grab Twix bites, which Twix is the best chocolate bar, no question. I won't hear anything else. They were sold out. Then I bought Coffee Crisp bites and realized they were too crunchy and probably be picked up on the audio, so we settled for caramel bites.
Not settled. They're great.
Oh, they're still great, but they were my well. It was my third choice though.
Yeah, I guess.
Caramel is good, but it's no Twix.
Sure.
So, with that being said, I'm going to throw it right over to Dylan to kick it off with his number 40 pick.
My number 40 game is a game I don't own, but Carlo does, and it just squeaked ahead of another similar game on the list, and this is Blue Lagoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Babylonia was in the last list. I do like Blue Lagoon a little bit better than Babylonia so far. Blue Lagoon is a great game. It's got so colorful, so much fun. It reminds me a lot of a game that I absolutely adore, but I do not own because it was hard to find, called Fjords. It does a lot of the same things as that game. It just... for how small it is and for how simple the rules really are in terms of what you're actually doing on your turn, there's so much strategic depth because of all the different ways you can score points and because of how you're competing for spots. There's this great moment in Blue Lagoon where you just realize that you've got a certain island secure, you've got another thing secure, you've got another thing secure, but you got to play somewhere, and you start looking around saying, who's going to force my hand somewhere? Where do I want to force someone's hand? If they're going to force my hand here, I'm going to force their hand here so that they can decide between them. There's so many great moments like that where you just can't help but laugh as you kind of look around the table, especially if you're playing a 3-player game. One person, I might force Carlo's hand, and then in response, he might force someone else's hand who might force my hand, and suddenly you're all having to decide who's going to do what. You're trying to, the fact that the two phases it plays in are just make it so interesting, so much fun. Yeah, it's one of those games that I think you just have to play to really, and play a full game to really see the brilliance of the strategy and how it comes into play. I absolutely adore it, and even though I don't own it myself, it's one that I've thought multiple times at some point I'm going to buy it to have in my collection because I want to be able to introduce it to players without having to try to mooch it off of Carlo or whatever the case may be. So yeah, great game, love it.
I'll have plenty more to say about that in a future video.
Yeah, I figured you might.
Yeah. All right, my number 40 pick is a relatively new game, came out last year, and that is Calico. So it is a tile placement game where everyone has their own little board that represents a quilt. You have 3 scoring objectives on there, and you're taking tiles that have a different color and pattern, and you're trying to surround these objectives to score points. It's very, very simple rules, super easy to learn, but it's a really it's a taxing game mentally. It causes you to sit there and second guess yourself and place something somewhere where it's saying goodbye to one objective that you won't be able to meet, and it can be frustrating. You can get to the end, and if you're a perfectionist, this game is going to drive you crazy because you're never going to be able to achieve everything you want. You're always going to feel like the randomness of the tile draw is preventing you from doing what you want. But every time I end a game of Calico, I feel like going back to it immediately to try and better my score. Plays amazingly at 2 players. With 3 or 4, it's okay. It's not as good, and it's one I'm just going to come back to quite a bit. I've already played it probably I think in the first week I got it, I played it 10 or 12 times with my wife. We love it. It's a really, really good game. Could be higher on the list next year, or it could fall off. We'll see what kind of legs it has, especially with with so many tilings games out there that we like to play. We'll see how it kind of lasts over time. But I really like Calico.
Yeah, this is one I think I just need to play more of because I've loved it when I've played it, but I just haven't played it enough for it to crack my top 50. Yeah, that's fair. But it's beautiful game, great strategy, and it's really, really brutal in terms of I remember playing it and being like, this is kicking me big time because I'm like, I've made a mistake here and I'm like, oh my god, how am I going to recover from that? And I only have a certain number of space I can place tiles on. Yeah, just a great game for how pretty it looks.
For sure. Yeah, deceiving for sure. It looks inviting, that's but it's going to just make you feel bad sometimes.
Yeah, great pick.
That's Calico.
All right, next on my list, number 39 is a game I talked about in my last video because Carlo had it on his, and that is Monstrosity. So just a little bit higher than you had it. I love this game. My dog is whining again. He just wants up here, and I'm going to lift him up after probably. So Monstrosity is a game I don't own, but Carlo does, and it's a party game. He already explained it a lot in the last video, so you probably already know, but it's so funny, and there's so much hilarity around the table playing this game. And again, like you said, it really depends on the group, but I feel like as you get an idea of like what the best groups are to introduce this to, you start to like have more success with like, I won't bring it out for this group, or I will bring it out for this group. But when you have the right people playing it and you're in the right mindset for it, I feel like it's just so much fun, and there's so much craziness that happens around the table when someone is trying to explain as best they can a monster, and then they're starting to forget the way things are, but also are realizing that they're leaving out specific things that are probably pretty important, like, oh yeah, the eyes are really big, but they forgot to mention that the eyes are dangling off the body, because originally, obviously, when you draw, you're going to put eyes onto a face, right? So there's things like that, and especially if people have already started to draw, suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, by the way, that it doesn't have any hands. You're like, what do you mean? You said it had arms.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say it had hands? Right? And suddenly, it's just like those moments are just so hard to replicate, and showing everyone each other's monsters. It's a drawing game where it does not matter if you have artistic skills. Like, you can be the greatest drawer ever. It's not going to give you an upper hand, and it's also not going to change how fun or how funny the game is. I'm going to buy this for myself 100%, and I've already had a lot of people ask me, hey, what do you recommend for a party game, at work and things? And I constantly now just say Monstrosity, especially if they have kids, because it's such an easy game to introduce to with any age range of people. You can play with all adults and have some drinks and have a good time, but if all of a sudden you're playing at a party with adults and some kids come by, you can easily include some kids come by. Yeah, some kids wander in from down the street. No, you know what I mean? But it's just easy to just say, hey, come in for a round or whatever, and it's not like you're not going to understand this or whatever. So I love this game. I absolutely cannot wait to add to my collection. I'm so glad that you bought it and introduced it to us.
Yeah, right on. No, I'm glad to see it on your list too. Yeah. It's such a good game. Yeah. All right, my 39th best game of all time is Ethnos. So this is a game, you just talked about a game that I own that you don't, and now this is one that you own that I don't own. Yeah. Ethnos is one that I could potentially see, if I had played it more, it might have been higher on the list. Over time, it might fall off the list. It's hard to say. I would need to play it more and at different player counts. I think I've only played it with 3 or 4 players and only a couple times, but it's an awesome, very simple area majority game that reminds me a lot. You mentioned it really well in your review when you said it's like Ticket to Ride, and I don't know, you said think Small World as well or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the turns fly by. You're basically either just drawing cards from a deck or playing cards from your hand, and whatever you play from your hand, whatever you don't play from your hand, let's say I play a set of 3 cards and I had 4 more cards left, the cards I didn't play get discarded to the open pile for other players to draw from. And that's one of the most brilliant things about the game, is that you can keep pushing your luck and trying to get a better set of cards by drawing, but the more you draw up, if then you have a huge card of hands and you only play a few of them, you discard those cards. Not only can other people pick them up, but then you think back, how many turns did I waste just drawing a card that I did nothing with? Yeah. So it's a push your luck game with area control, quick card drafting, set collection type stuff. Different, you mix and match different types of, what do you call them? Factions or whatever.
Oh, like the actual, I can't remember what they call them.
The monsters or whatever. Yeah, there's just different ones every game, so the game feels different every time. The amount of points that are in each area. So there's a different little puzzle to figure out every time, and which abilities are going to be more or less useful. It's an awesome game and plays in a really quick time, and I think is a really good kind of intro level. If you're the type of person who wants to eventually be introducing your friends to games like Blood Rage, Rising Sun, these big area control games, Ethnos is an awesome starting point. It's maybe not quite a gateway game. I mentioned Ticket to Ride. It is more complex than that. Yeah. But anyways, I've said enough, but I really like Ethnos. Really impressed by how smooth of a design it is.
Yeah, I'm happy to see it's on your list. I won't say a whole lot now because it is going to show up later on mine, but I'm happy that you, even though you haven't owned it and you've played it just through my copy, that you've had it resonate that much.
For sure.
I think we even played it on a Tabletop Simulator once or something.
I think we did. Yeah. And it plays up to 6 players, which is a huge plus for these types of games.
Yeah. And it plays better, in my opinion, at 4 to 6.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the ideal range. But
yeah, that is Ethnos.
Funny timing, because it's not mine, it's not Ethnos, but my next pick is Ticket to Ride Europe.
Okay.
So I don't own Europe, but I actually do prefer the Europe version. I own Ticket to Ride the original. I think you own Ticket to Ride Europe.
Yeah, correct? I do. I didn't realize yours was the North America.
Yeah, so I've played both, and I just enjoyed Ticket to Ride Europe more, based on the map, based on the I think it's the stations or whatever. Yeah, the tunnels. I like that whole aspect they had there, and honestly, I think even I like Rails and Sails even more than the original, and it's the original that I own. But regardless, I had to include Ticket to Ride on here somewhere because it is one of the first games that really got me into the hobby, and I just really, truly do love coming back to it. And I played a lot of it on the app, and I kind of forgot about that when I was making my list, that I used to have the app for it and played a whole ton of it solo or online. I love it. It's a very simple game. It's not one that I am necessarily going to say to people, hey, who wants to come over and play Ticket to Ride tonight? But I could see myself constantly bringing this out with people who don't play games very often as an option for my collection. Or if it's something where, one of those nights where you just can't quite decide, but you want to play something. I think we were at the cabin one time, and it was one of those things where it's like, we don't have a lot of mental capacity to get into something super strategic. We want something that we are familiar with, and we're just like, let's just do a Ticket to Ride or whatever.
Yeah,
and you can kick back, and everyone knows how to play at this point. And you're just collecting cards, and you have your mindset of where you want to go. And if you're playing with 4, it can get a little cutthroat with closing off paths.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to have your gold card be like, I have to connect the 2 cities on the opposite end of the map. Can I pull it off this game? That's been really fun. I know this is the Europe version I'm talking about, but in the North America version, it's fun. The Winnipeg's on the map too.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, the Europe version I think is the superior version, but really any version of Ticket to Ride, within reason, could have been in this spot on the list. It's a game that I just have a lot of fond memories of. Probably will stay in my collection for a long time. I probably will eventually leave, but I think for the foreseeable future it won't, and I just really love going back to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a good pick. Doesn't make my list, not my top 50, but it's a game I played a lot, especially when I first got into the hobby, and it holds up really well.
Yeah.
All right, number 38 on my list is, going back to Calico, is another fairly new game. That's Nidavellir, or Nidavellir. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, but this is a set collection, drafting, bidding game that really took me by surprise. Something about the artwork, the box cover and whatever, just didn't have me super interested about it at first, but everyone starts with a certain number of coins, and you're using these coins to bid on these cards that are basically dwarves in a tavern, and you're drafting these dwarves to kind of complete your army. And there's 5 different types of dwarves, and there's this thing of like divided priorities where you're incentivized to get dwarves of the same type because they kind of multiply in their scoring in different ways, and the more you have of a certain type the better. But every time you get one of each of the 5 dwarves, you get to take a bonus hero card from the display. And the heroes are all one of a kind, or most of them at least. They have interesting abilities. The game just has a lot going on. It has this coin upgrade system that's really cool. I've done a review, and there's a how to play video on our channel, so I won't talk more about how the game plays, but it surprised me. I've played it, I think, 7 or 8 times on Board Game Arena, and I've seen people win with different strategies every time. There doesn't seem to be like a way to solve the game, and the fact that you have the coin upgrade system with the drafting, like, it's just something really addictive about it, and the really high scores at the end of the game. It's just a really fun game, and it plays in like 45 minutes. I don't know what to expect in terms of the longevity in my top 50 future years. Could fall off the list, could move up, I don't know. But it's a great game.
Yeah, it doesn't make my top 50 list, but I'm surprised it's on yours, but I like happily surprised because it is a really good game. I have enjoyed it every time I've played it. I probably need to play a little bit more to see if it slots in over a couple others, because I didn't really even consider it in my ranking because of some of the other ones I have played over it. But yeah, super fun, and the coin upgrade system is pretty much my favorite part about it. I think it's what makes it so interesting, combining that element with some other familiar elements we've seen. That's the unique thing about it that I really like. So, for sure. Yeah, great pick. All right, my number 37, I'm going to guess this is not on your list, is Terraforming Mars.
I expected it to be higher on yours.
No, yeah, I like Terraforming Mars, but it's not one of my favorite games. Okay. It's one of my top 50 favorite games. Right. But not higher than that. So yeah, I really like Terraforming Mars. I haven't gone back to it as much recently. When we played and reviewed Ares Expedition, I was reminded about how much I love the original because of the things about Ares Expedition that kind of scratched that itch for me. It's a game I will absolutely go back to, and I know a lot of people who do enjoy it a lot, so it's one that I could see when they're coming over that they'll absolutely want to play. It does have a whole slew of cards in there, and it is a tableau builder where every game you're going to potentially build it a little bit differently, go after different things depending on which cards you get dealt, and also at what point in the game you get dealt them, because often you'll get dealt some cards early on in the game that you're like, do I really want to keep this around in my hand constantly until the conditions on the board are met so that I can afford this card? Right. Or do I want to just discard this now and admit that I'm just not going to be able to go with that strategy? I would highly recommend, like many do, playing with the Prelude expansion, because it just makes the start of the game much more interesting, and it also makes it a little bit of a shorter experience. Not by a lot, but enough to make it.
I was going to ask you, is the 37 ranking the base game or the base game with Prelude? I guess how much would it change in your rankings with or without?
Well, I still loved it without Prelude, but I feel like it solidified itself a place on my list for probably a while based on the fact that now I only play with Prelude.
Of course, yeah. Once you have Prelude, you'll never go back.
Yeah, and luckily it's a not inexpensive addition to the game. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great game. You have a bit of an area control mechanic too with the original Terraforming Mars, where you have the board in the middle and you're placing tiles with your own cubes on it and trying to as you terraform Mars, get the most territory as you can. But I love going back to it. I will admit it does oftentimes feel a bit long for what it is, and that's usually what keeps it away from the table for me. And that's why I like including Prelude with it. But I still really enjoy every single session I play. It never feels overly long to me. So I could honestly see it going either way in terms of how it's going to move in future years and stuff. But I think for right now, I'm pretty happy with where it ended up.
Cool. Yeah. I'm surprised. I expected it to be higher on your list. I don't know why. I guess we haven't played it in a while. But
yeah, I still like it though.
All right, my number 37 game of all time. I feel like you're going to be surprised by this one.
Oh boy.
Spring Meadow.
Oh, I'm surprised it's on your top 50.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I seem to remember enjoying this, maybe not a lot more than you, but I felt like I enjoyed it quite a bit more than you did when we played it. And you'll notice it is above Patchwork. Mm-hmm. There's a couple things that I really like about Spring Meadow, and I will say right now it's my favorite of the trilogy of Cottage Garden, Indian Summer, Spring Meadow kind of thing. I also like it more than New York Zoo. I put it above Patchwork, so it's my favorite. Well, whatever, I'm getting into other Uwe Rosenberg polyomino games at this time, but there's a couple things I really like about it. It's the one that reminds me, these games always get compared to Tetris, right? People always say, oh, it's those Tetris style pieces, but this is the game that actually, of all the polyomino games, is most like Tetris of the ones I've played, because you're incentivized to build from the bottom up because of the way the scoring works. And I have a review on how to play video on the channel, so don't get too much into those mechanics. You can go watch that stuff, but the other thing I really like is that your points only matter at the end of the round. When the kind of end round condition happens, you compare your current points, and then whoever has the most points gets this little hiking pin that says you won a round, and the first player to win 2 rounds wins. But then you're not tracking your points anymore. Your points don't really matter. It's whoever wins 2 rounds wins the game.
It's whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
don't matter.
I was like, what are you talking? Yeah, makes sense. And just the aspect of the short-term and long-term strategy, if you push to get a higher score early, the tiles that have the little burrows on them are going to be smaller. So if you want to cover more space, you have to take tiles without burrows. But the burrows help you chain things together and get additional rocks and have this building combo for later. But as soon as you win a round, you have to cover up all your burrows. So when do you want to win a round? When do you want to close off your combo engine, basically? When do you, and it has this good catch-up mechanic, because if you still were building this thing and you fell behind, you didn't win an early round, you're probably going to win a later one. So it often has this really interesting back and forth, plays well at all player counts. The solo mode is surprisingly good. And I'm surprised every time I go back and play it how much I enjoy it, and it just sits on the shelf sometimes because it doesn't look as nice as the other games in the trilogy. But yeah, it's an excellent game and one that I think is totally underrated. I think the average rating on Board Game Geek is 7.1 or something, but I think it's criminally underrated. It's a really good polyomino game.
Yeah, I'm surprised, but not overly surprised because I did enjoy it. It's just not enough to make my list of other polyominoes.
Yeah, I'll hold you. We're gonna play it again someday, and I want to see if you like it more than you remember, if it's still just pretty good.
It's been a while since I've gone back to it, so that'd be great. All right, my number 36 is a game called Zolkin the Mayan Calendar. So this is a game that is honestly, probably in terms of table presence, one of the, along there with Everdell and things like that, one of the games that is most striking because of the gears that you shift and it moves all your worker placement pieces around. That's one of the reasons I love it so much. But it's also just, there's a lot of choices, which I love in worker placement games. And these ones, it's not just a choice of, I want to go here. It's you go somewhere and you're committing to going there and staying on that track for a future turn. But that can shift. You can say, I'm going to stay here for 7 turns until my piece gets to where I want it to go. Or you're going to say, oh, based on what's happening, now I need to pull it off sooner and take this action. So you get to sort of adjust on the fly, but the longer you stay on a wheel, generally the stronger the ability that you're going to take is going to be. And every wheel has its own sort of theme that's tied to it, and you have managing your essentially your income, like your corn, to be able to afford everything, but also as a way to be able to feed your workers at the end. You always feel like you can't do it all, and that feeling in games is always just a good sign of it that I'm in, it's a good game I'm going to love. But in this one especially, it just feels like I need to feed these people, but I also need to afford, like, and already like 5 turns out from the end of the season or at the end of the cycle, you're like, how am I going to possibly manage this? And now you're having to like make decisions based on that. Maybe I won't feed them and things like it's just, I love how much you have to think about all that kind of stuff and how hard it gets to make, and it gets easier over time because you eventually get abilities like, oh, this makes it so you don't have to feed these workers and stuff, but
you have to work to get that engine going.
Yes, exactly. And every game feels a little bit different based because everyone will always start with different resources, and you get a choice of different tiles to show what you're going to start with. So you can kind of, say, I'm going to start with these that move me up these temple paths, so I'm going to play the temple game. So even just the way that it introduces how you start the game, a lot of games it's like, oh, first player starts with 3, second player starts with 4 or whatever. This one you can start with vastly different things. I can start with like a bunch of resources and Crystal Skull, whereas you just start with a bunch of corn, and now we have a completely different strategy in how we're approaching the start of the game. I really like that. It's my favorite out of like the trilogy of games that are included in this, or the 4 games that are included in this with like Teotihuacan and stuff. And it's one that I always go back to, and it's for how complex it actually looks. I've actually had a lot of success, surprisingly, introducing to people who don't play board games all that often. I think it's because it's so much fun to move the gears on the board.
And I was going to say, I've seen people before, either after playing it or before playing it, like question whether the gears are kind of gimmicky, and they absolutely are not. Honestly, it works so well for the game that like if you haven't played it, you have to at least try it. And this is one that isn't on my list because first off, I've only played it, I think, twice, so I want to try it more. And the first time we played it wrong. It was so punishing.
Wrong.
We played with a rule that basically we weren't getting as much corn, and the whole game was just like struggling to feed our people. We basically got nothing else done. And I was like, this game seems like all it is feeding your people. Like, I don't understand.
The scoring track goes like to 100, and we ended the game with like no one had over 20 points. So
or
like,
20 or 30 was the winning score.
I remember looking and being like, and I taught the game to everyone. I was like, I have made a huge error somewhere. Like something has gone way wrong. But we played the entire game before we realized that. I felt so bad.
But it was worded kind of strange. It is a hard. Anyways, whatever.
That's
Zulkin.
Yeah, number 36 is Zulkin.
Okay, cool. My number 36 is another fairly new game, that is Dune Imperium. So this one is one that I could see going either way. I could see it moving up my list, especially with that new Rise of Ix expansion, which I really want to get. Or it could drop off the list. We'll see what kind of replay value it holds. But and you talked about, and they're not really that similar in how they play, but people are always comparing Dune Imperium and Lost Ruins of Arnak. So far, I like Dune Imperium more. I love the kind of idea of the cards that you play in your hand, or the cards that you're adding to your deck, have symbols on them that denote which spots on the board you can even go to, because those are the houses that those spaces are associated with, and you have to basically have like not agreements, but like some type of influence with that house to be able to go there. So I just love that decision part, and the interaction, how at the end of every round there's a conflict that everyone's kind of fighting over, and you're sending troops in, but you can sit out kind of one round and not really go for the conflict, so you have more troops ready for the next round. It's a really cool game. Everyone has a starting kind of power and everything. Dune's obviously hot right now, right? The movie and stuff. So yeah, it's a game that I definitely want to play more. I've played it 4 or 5 times already. I've tried it solo, 2 players, and 3 players. It's great at all those player counts. It's one that I'm eager to play with you because I think you'll like it quite a bit too.
I can't wait to play this one. Ever since you bought it, I was super pumped, and I just haven't had a chance to play it with you yet. But over the holidays, I'm really hoping we get this one to the table.
Yeah, and the action spaces are just a lot of fun. There's a lot of different stuff that's happening, and you can build your deck in different ways. So yeah, I think it's a really cool game. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and for the depth that it has, the rules are very simple to get into. The rulebook's really well done and stuff. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend you give Dune Imperium a shot.
Nice, so I'll pick. I'm surprised that you've liked it enough to include it like even this high on the list. I thought it might make it, but I thought it was going to be like squeaking on. So that's awesome to hear. Yeah, great pick. All right, and my number 35 is a game that I've had for a long time and played a whole bunch of, and that is Codenames. Nice. I feel like this is one that I could confidently say, had you played this more in your board gaming life, or had it and introduced it much, you probably would have been on your top 50. I just know you haven't played it a lot.
I've only played it like 3 or 4 times, but it's an awesome game.
I've played so many different versions of it, and there's different themes and everything now. And I almost included the Duet version on this list instead, because I've actually played that one a lot more recently. But what I love about Duet is the same things I love about Codenames, and I like because Codenames allows you to have bigger groups and have multiple teams and everything like that. So Codenames is just so great that it's word games are just easy I shouldn't say they're easy for everyone to get into, but they're very accessible in a way that like you don't have to learn a bunch of rules or anything. You're basically just having to give someone a clue, and a lot of times in clue games, if it's it can be difficult for people to come up with clues, but I find that in code names, because you can apply the clues to things that are of your, even just like your relationship with someone. Like, you'll get this because I'm going to give you this clue that we've had to have this inside joke, or this group will know this because we watched this show. It becomes easier to give clues. And the times I played Duet or I played Codenames, that's sort of been where I've succeeded the most, where I'm just like, how do I possibly connect these 3 words so that I can give them all as one clue? So instead of saying like, food 1, I can say food 3, even though there's technically only one food there. And we might have an inside joke where it's like, we've joked about how like, this is something that should be a food because it looks so tasty, and only you would get that, right?
Yeah.
So I just, it's a game that anytime I have a big group of people, I will absolutely suggest Codenames, and a lot of people have already played Codenames, so you don't even have to do like the rules teach, and the rules teach for Codename is like 2 minutes. And then because it's a team environment, you also don't have the pressure of feeling like you have to contribute. Like, you can just guess people's clues, and whenever you feel comfortable, if you're playing like 4-on-4 or whatever the case may be, it makes it a little bit easier. You get to watch the other team and see how they're delivering their clues. It's so much fun. It's a game I probably will never get rid of, and I like it so much that now when I was given the Duet version, I think it was a birthday gift from a friend of mine, I remember thinking like, oh, this will be fun to play, but I don't know if I'll want to have 2 versions of Codenames. I'm not going to get rid of either one anytime soon, because as a 2-player version and as a group game, it works so well. So absolutely love it. I think you should definitely play more of it, because I know I have to. It'll continue to grow for you the more you play.
For sure. I think part of the reason I haven't played it as much is a lot of the time when I'm in a party setting with people are choosing to play or suggesting a game that involves more talking and communicate. Sometimes Codenames, people are silently looking at stuff, but I love like the highs of Codenames when you send those clues and people figure it out, and the debriefing after when you're like, oh, that clue, this and that, like you're talking it over is so fun. And I can see this definitely cracking the list in the future. I think I just have to have a couple of those really awesome Codenames experiences for it to get on there. And I did just order Codenames Duet for myself.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah, I'm hoping to play that with my wife at home soon.
So good. I love it. Yeah.
And it's just one of those simple games that I think will be around in the hobby for years and years to come.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, my number 35 game is one of the newest games I've played, or not newest games I've played, but newest releases. It's a 2021 game, and it is Cascadia.
Wow.
Yes, Cascadia, I think, is here to stay for a long time on this list. I don't see it going anywhere from my top 50 anytime soon. There is such an awesome level of simplicity to this game, but a sense of satisfaction too, where you're just building your own little terrain of different, like land types, as well as like wildlife, and there's different scoring conditions. I'm not going to get into too much about how it plays because we've talked about it on the channel before, and it's a very popular game right now. You can find all kinds of info online about it, but we got to play it online with a couple of the designers, Rob and Sean, a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, I think, on Tabletop Simulator. And right away, as soon as I played it, I knew, like, I'm buying this. This is going to be in my collection for a long time. And since getting it, I've played it solo a couple times. And it's just, even playing it solo, it's so good. And, like, normally games that have a solo mode, I'm going to enjoy playing a lot more with players. And I'm sure when I play it with 3-4 players, whatever, I'm going to enjoy it even more. But, there's just something... It's similar to I have it higher than Calico, which I mentioned, right? It's from the same, not the same designer, but the same kind of
team.
And sorry, I should say the developers. Rob and Sean weren't designers, but they're developers for Flat Out Games.
Yeah.
And it's just a game that I can see myself coming back to all the time because of the different, like, it's not as restrictive as Calico because you can build your thing out in whatever direction you want. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a lot more freedom and it's a lot more relaxing. But I just see this game having pretty much endless replay value and you being able to teach it to pretty much anyone. We'll see where it ends up on the list next year, but it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, we need to play it over the holidays again because, like I said,
sure.
That's the only time I've played Cascadia, so that's why it's not on my list, is when we played it with the team there. And we got one of the rules wrong, which like didn't affect like our enjoyment.
Well, it's not that we got a rule wrong. We overlooked the scoring conditions, so we didn't.
We forgot.
We scored poorly in an area because we were playing without that in mind. Yeah.
So it didn't hamper our experience at all. It just hampered our score.
Yeah, we got destroyed by Rob.
But I loved it. I remember loving the fact that there was going to be a variety on like the abilities and things like that too. So I want to go back to it. So when you bought it or you had it coming in, I knew that I was going to, and I don't know whether I'll get my own copy or not until I play more of yours. So
we'll definitely play it soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Over the holidays.
Really great game and beautiful too.
Yeah.
All right, my number 34, is that what we're on? 34, I believe?
Yeah.
Is Everdell. So Everdell, I've had in my collection for a while. It was one of the first, earlier video we did on this channel was like I did a how to play and a review of it. Obviously a super popular game. I think some people love this game. I think to be fair, I think that it gets I think it's obviously a good enough game to make this list, but I think it gets way more love sometimes than it even deserves, just because it's such a beautiful game and has great table presence and the artwork's gorgeous. But I really do like Everdell. It has like it's worker placement mixed with tableau building. I always like when genres I enjoy find a really cohesive way to mesh together, and I really like this. There are some things about it that sometimes feel restrictive, or that they happen the same each game, where you're looking for a certain pair of critters, and you get one and you're relying on another one coming out that doesn't come out, or when it does, it's like everyone knows you've been waiting for that one, so it's easy to block the person, whatever the case may be. But there are enough avenues you can take to get your score that it's usually not too much of a big deal if that happens, and it's just so much fun to see how you're going to build your little woodland area. I think it's like a 3x5 grid that you're essentially building, and you have max that 15 spots. You can't have any more than that unless the card has an ability to doesn't count as a spot in your area. But coupled with all the different worker placement spots you're going to, and the fact that some of them are different in each game, so you might have a card out in this game that is a worker placement spot that says you're going to get these resources, where the next game, because that's not out, suddenly that resource is in super high demand compared to the last game you played, Everdell. I like games that do that, where every time we play, it's like, oh, this game berries were easy, everyone had berries. Next time it's like, man, this is a like, how are we possibly going to do this?
You can't just go in with the same strategy every time. You got to reassess the board and what's going on.
And it's a minor change, but like it's enough to make it so that every game feels a little different. And I love that the game is like really expandable. They've already released, I think, like 3 or 4 or 5 expansions or something. Like each one adds onto the board where it feels like it should have always been there in a way.
Fleshes out the world a bit. It's very thematic. And one of the nicest looking games.
For sure. Makes it a more complex game too if you're really into it. It's one I will keep for a while, even because it's funny how many times I've had someone say to me that just dabbles in board games. I've gone on a couple dates this year, and the amount of people that have only played a couple board games but have said, have you ever heard of Everdell? I've been surprised how many people, and I think it's because it's so attractive to look at, and it's when you have the tree and everything set up, you're like, oh my god, this game looks so cute, I want to play it, right? It's easy to just say, even though I don't know all the strategy or whatever, I'm just enjoying playing and looking at all the cards and feeling like I'm playing a bit of a cartoon and stuff. I'll probably keep it for a while, and it's one that I always enjoy going back to, and I'm really excited to get more of the expansions, or get the expansions, I don't have any, and actually see how well it starts to expand when you add in Pearlbrook and Spirecrest and all these other ones. So that is Everdell. I know I'm a bigger fan of it than you are. I think this is the highest reviewed game when we were doing scores on our website that I had reviewed on the ones I did. If I was going back, I'd probably bring it down a little bit, but I still really do love it.
So you've cooled on it a little bit.
I've cooled on a little bit, but then that's why it's sort of like on this close to the middle section of the list, but I still really like Everdell.
Cool. See, I guess, we haven't spoken about it for a while, so I was expecting it to be maybe not quite in the top 20, but I was expecting it to be much higher on your list.
Yeah. So I cooled a little bit on it, but I still love it.
Cool. Yeah, and I've only played it once. I enjoy it. It's a great game. I'll never turn down a game of it, but not in my top 50.
Yeah.
All right, my number 34 game of all time is Merchants and Marauders. This is a game that is probably just going to keep falling further and further down the list until it's off the list.
That's a grim way to start this.
No, it's and here's
the highest it'll ever be.
Absolutely. Unless, because I've in one of my previous curating my collection videos where I talk about games I'm culling, I decided to get rid of this. I haven't actually gotten rid of the game yet. It's sitting on a shelf, but I'm hoping that maybe a friend or family member or someone will take it off my hands and will sort of learn to love it, embrace it the way that I did for so many years. It was one of the first 10 or 15 games I bought. I bought this game a long time ago. It's basically a sandbox style pirate game where you can either be a merchant or a pirate or somewhere in between. So you can be buying and selling goods. You can go out and fight other pirates, try and board people's ships or shoot at them from afar. You have to stash gold in your chest that stays secret from other players. You can get rumor cards and missions and sail the Caribbean to go finding out that these rumors are true. But if you're a pirate, you have bounties, so you can't go to certain ports and people come after you, the naval ships. But if you're a merchant, then pirates come after you. It's such an involved, the player interaction is so high. The reason why I'm getting rid of it is that it usually takes at least minimum 2.5 to 3 hours to play, sometimes more.
Minimum, yeah.
Yeah, and it the rules teach is pretty heavy, and because it's the type of game I would only play 2 or 3 times a year, or sometimes once a year, every time I went back I had to refresh on some of the rules, because there's some intricacies especially when it comes to the combat with the dice rolling and how many dice you get and how the phases work. And so it just became a game that with more limited time as I get older, it's hard to get the game to the table, but the memories of that game are among my fondest memories in gaming.
Yeah.
I've played this game probably 10 times or so. I had the expansion that was just awesome, and there's one particular memory where we had a crazy blizzard, snowstorm in May a few years ago, and I was at the cabin with two brothers-in-law, and the power went out mid-game. We were all up to like 5 or 6 points, and so we played the last like hour and a half to 2 hours of this game by candlelight exclusively, and that stuck with me so much, not only because we're playing this pirate game locked up in a cabin in May, like just snowed in essentially, but also because we kept like one person would die, and then you have to pick a new pirate and come back, and then the other person would die. Like, it was such a back and forth game. It's so much fun. It's just hard to get to the table because of the length and the rules, but it's one that I hope to play again, but I don't want to be the one responsible for keeping up with the rules and setting a night for it. So if you're looking for a pirate game, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I've only ever played this once. It is a lot of game there. Like, if I'm going to spend that much time on a board game, I would, I'd gravitate more towards like even like Praga Caput Regni or like Lisboa for that kind of length, and I'd probably enjoy it more. But I was glad I experienced it once, and I could see how, like, if that's a game you came back to a lot, like you have in the past, how you have those memories associated with it, because you have those moments that you're gonna always remember from
for sure
games.
And it is better the more you play it, because you learn the pirates, you learn the merchants, the strategy comes out a bit more, but it is tough to get to that many plays of it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, my number 33 is a really popular game. I'm pretty sure it might even be in the top 20 now on Board Game Geek, and that is Wingspan.
Wow.
Yeah, so I really like Wingspan. It's the same thing as Everdell. It's a game that it's very easy for me to introduce people because of how pretty it is. Sometimes you have some people be like, oh, it's a game about birds, but I think the theme looks even better when it's actually on the table. You see the little eggs and everything like that. And plus, I love mini eggs, and it looks like you have to with a bunch of mini eggs. I really like it. Like, it's funny because every time I play it, I go into it thinking, yeah, I like Wingspan, but I don't know if I want to go back to it. And then I play and I go, oh man, what am I talking about? I love Wingspan. And we reviewed the app version, so I got a whole bunch of extra plays in on there, and that sort of re-sparked my love for it a little bit too. There's a ton of cards in the deck, which means that there's birds that I still haven't seen, and the combinations especially that I still haven't used. The funnest part is having to like figure out how you're going to position your birds and when you're going to trigger them to have the combos that trigger, because you're triggering each row at a time in each habitat or whatever. So being able to trigger them in a certain order where it sort of trails down because you've positioned your birds just right. And some birds can move to different ecosystems, so like you can have there's a lot of intricacies in it for a game that sometimes just gets talked about how beautiful it is or how pretty it is. Like, there's actually a lot going on in it that is really fun to play with, and I find that the scores are pretty varied, and every time I play, people do approach it with different strategies in terms of how many eggs they're gathering, or how they're positioning their birds, that I'm always kind of surprised by like everyone's strategy and what they're doing on their board, and it reminds me how much variety there is. So there's also a ton, like I think there's like 2 or 3 different expansions out for this now that take place in different regions of the world that add more birds, and so it's very expandable, and it's one that I'm never going to have trouble getting to the table, especially I almost forgot about the dice tower. That's super pretty and attractive for people to see. It's a really fun game. I won't say any more because I know a lot has been said about Wingspan. I know some people say, they think it's overrated and stuff, and I mean, any game like Everdell and Wingspan that gets talked about this much, for sure on some level it is, but it is also a game I just love playing, so, I think it completely earns this spot on the list.
Yeah, and congrats to Elizabeth Hargrave. This just sold 1 million copies.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but what a crazy achievement.
Yeah,
That's
it's been awesome for the board game hobby. It's a great game. I've only played it once, so it's one I want to try more, and it's not on my top 50, but I would never turn down a game of Wingspan.
Yeah, Wingspan 33.
All right, my number 33 pick is another sort of nostalgia pick similar to my Merchants and Marauders pick, and that is Dominion. This is a game I've played. I mean, if you watched a recent video on our channel of the games I've played over 100 times, this is on there. I've played so much Dominion. When I first got into the hobby, it was one of my absolute favorite games. I never actually owned it, but I had a couple different friends who owned it with expansions. And I played so much of it, and also online. There used to be a great implementation. There might still be around, but it's kind of the deck builder that I think it's the first deck builder I ever played, and so it's still the most like memorable and influential deck builder for me. It's just the pure deck building. There isn't like a whole lot of theme. It's a game that when I first got into the hobby, I did dismiss it for a while because the box cover looks so like boring and doesn't tell you anything about the game really. Right. But it's so fun, and if you're just gonna play the base game, it does have limited replay value. But with expansions, this game has just Like the legs on this game with expansions is unbelievable. Especially if you get like the best ones. There's all kinds of ones. Some of them I haven't played. It's not something I enjoy a lot with 4 players because there's a lot of downtime, especially as you build up your decks and you get combos going.
Right.
Sometimes you watch someone's turn take like 2-3 minutes as they're just playing card after card and you're just kind of sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
So it's best with 2, still really good with 3. Something that I don't feel a need to own because if so, I would want to bunch the expansions and the amount of shelf space it takes up.
Yeah.
But it's something that I'm happy to revisit, once or twice a year. A couple friends of mine, we usually do something called the Dominion Cup once or twice a year where we just play like a best of 3 or best of 5 Dominion thing. It's a really, really fun game, and it still does deck building super well and holds up really well to this day. That's Dominion.
Yeah, it doesn't make my top 50, but I did own it for a while, and I did love it, but it's just been replaced by so many other deck builders for me. But I absolutely, it'll always have a special place because of what it did for deck builders and really it's not in my collection anymore, but I'll always have fond memories of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, number 32 for me is a game I think is pretty sure is going to be higher up on your list, and that is Arboretum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Only 32.
Only
I was
32?
It
That's
to be
pretty
high.
good.
Yeah, but I was expecting it to be higher. What is this nonsense?
I like Arboretum a whole lot.
Not enough.
It's a great game, and I just haven't played it a lot recently, and that's probably influencing why it's not higher. And I don't like it with 2 as much as some people do. And I've played it with 2. The most recent time I played Arboretum was with 2 as well. So
that's why. You gotta play with 4.
I
Best
feel
of
like
4.
I feel like if I get a bunch more 4-player games of Arboretum, it could probably move up because I really, really like this game, and it's super mean, it's super cutthroat while also being super beautiful on the table. That we have I guess it's the newer implementation, the newer version or whatever.
Yeah, it's not quite the deluxe one with the wooden box, but it's not the green and gold art that the original one was. When we wanted it, it was that one. We had to pre-order it, and remember, we waited like 2 years for the pre-order to be fulfilled on this game.
Oh my God, it took forever.
Is that why it's this low on your list?
Yeah, no.
You're still spiteful about having to wait for the
Just
pre-order?
a little bit. No, but it's like I always have fun playing it. It's always super cutthroat. You have to play with the right group if they don't like mean games, because someone might look at this on the shelf and be like, "Well, this game looks nice," and then realize that you're just completely destroying each other. But it's tons of fun, and it makes you make some really tough decisions about. Do I want to keep something in my hand just to stop someone else, or free up that spot to further my own agenda, which is one of the things I like about a game like Lost Cities and different other games like that, because you have to weigh, is my interest in getting points better than giving my opponent points? Which one's going to be worse here? It's just an interesting thought process, especially when you have like 4 people around the table to start thinking about what everyone's doing. So yeah, great game. Again, I could see it going higher, and I would not be surprised if it's higher next year. I think it'll just involve me having more plays of it in the coming year.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'll have a lot more to say about it in a future video, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
All right, my number 32 game of all time. I think this might surprise you at how low it dropped, kind of thing for me. Not dropped, because I haven't done this list before.
Race to the Galaxy.
No, get out of here. Lost Cities.
Wow! Holy smokes! I'm actually shocked.
Okay, I know, and
Wow.
this is why is because I've played the online version over 100 times on Board Game Arena, and I love the game. But the reason it has dropped is partially because the physical implementation of the game. I had to weigh. I couldn't just rank the game just based on the digital version, and playing it physically has some other barriers that I own Lost Cities, the physical copy, and I've only played it once, and I've owned it for almost a year. I've only played the physical version once because there's a lot of shuffling cards between rounds. Even the way you add up the scores involves some multiplication and writing stuff down and then adding it up later. It just doesn't feel quite as smooth as playing it online.
Right.
So if I was just talking about the online version, it would be definitely higher on my list. And I think I've also played it a lot where now I just don't feel the need to go back to it as much. But in terms of a 2-player only game with simple rules that has that perfect feel of that tug of war and the push and pull that we love so much about 2-player only games, it's by my favorite designer, Reiner Knizia, and it's something I will never ever turn down a game of.
Yeah.
But nowadays, with limited opportunities to play 2-player only games, it's no longer one of the first or even second 2-player games that I'm going to gravitate to. So who knows, it could still eventually move back up higher on my list, or it could stay kind of right where it is. It's an awesome game. But yeah, there's other 2-player games I like a little more now.
Okay, I'll have more to say later when I reveal where it is on my list, which is the correct spot for it to be.
Yeah, Board Game Arena future champion in the making here. What did you get to number 2 overall online or something?
I did. I was number 2 overall, and then I slipped a bunch because I tried to make a push for number 1, but I haven't played it online in a while. But I played my physical version a lot. I love it, but yeah, I'll talk about it more later.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. I'm curious to see how high up it is for you.
Yeah, and I have to look at my list here. Oh yes, right. So my number 31, the last one for this video, is a game called Rising Sun. I love this game. I've only played it like I think 3 times or 4 times, but that's because each session seems like multiple sessions because of how long it is and how involved it is, and usually it's like the reason we're gathering. But I love having a game like this in my collection that is specifically meant to be like, we are getting together not to play board games tonight, we're getting together to play Rising Sun. Everyone comes with their negotiation hats on. It's better if you already have an idea of what the game is, but the aspect of area control, and look with these gorgeous miniatures where like every game you're gonna have different ones introduced, and everyone's gonna buy different monsters from the market or take different monsters from the market to introduce onto the board. Each one's gonna have a different effect, and everyone also already has their own ability that they interact with the world in their own unique way. And adding into the fact that you can have these alliances that you're forming with people, and then you can break them whenever it makes sense to, and people are constantly breaking alliances. I like having a game like that. It's like the same reasons my dad used to really enjoy playing Risk growing up and having like Risk nights. It's just like, for me, I feel like I never gravitated to Risk quite as much, but Rising Sun sort of filled a bit of that niche for me, where it was like, I would love to just have a Rising Sun night every month. Like, in the same way I'm playing King's Dilemma and doing that now, I would for sure go and say, hey, like, let's meet once a month to play Rising Sun with the same group that don't have to do any rules teaching, you just jump in. I just want to play more of it. So it's a game I'm 100% going to go back to as soon as, I guess we already are starting to gather with more groups, but in 2022, I'm going to start scheduling nights again for it because every time I played it, I've had such a blast playing it. So that's cool. Rising Sun. Yeah.
Not on my list. I don't like it as much as you. I've enjoyed my plays of it because of the interaction it brings around the table. People are laughing. People are trash talking. I love that kind of interaction. Yeah. But I think the first time I played it, I felt almost like, I think I won with a faction, but the faction felt, I don't want to talk about balance or saying it's overpowered because I've only played it once, but it didn't feel like I had to do anything particularly clever to win. Like, I felt like I almost got kind of like lucky, right? And I won maybe because of other players making mistakes or something like that. And then the second time I played a different faction. I feel like I came in with a target on my back because of the first game, and I got attacked pretty hard. I remember 2 different players kind of came at me early. I fell so far behind, like half an hour or 40 minutes into the game, I felt like I already had no chance of winning, and I just felt like I was out of the game so early. So it's one I'd be open to playing again just to try the other 2 or 3 factions. Yeah. But it's not going to be a game I would choose to play, and if I'm going to play a game that takes that long, going back to what we talked about, I would prefer to play something like Merchants and Marauders over Rising Sun if it was like a big interactive game kind of thing. And I'm eager to also try Blood Rage and Ankh, which are in the trilogy from...
We have not played Blood Rage, and I think if we had, maybe that would have made the list instead of Rising Sun for me, and maybe that would have made your list. I don't know. I heard Blood Rage is really good, but eventually when you play it, we'll see what happens to this.
Yeah, but lots of fun to be had for Rising Sun. I don't want to sound too negative, and I have only played it twice.
Yeah.
All right, and my number, this is 31, right? Yeah, my number 31 pick, a very different game from Rising Sun, is Just One.
Oh, wow, yeah.
This is a party game that I think won the Spiel des Jahres in 2018 or 19, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like the type of game that should have been designed years and years and years ago. It's so simple. Basically, someone has a clue, like a word clue that they give to the other players that they can't see, and everyone else has a whiteboard, and they're trying to basically write down a single one-word clue, right? Just one word. And then basically the player who is giving or can't see the clue closes their eyes, everyone else shows their clues, and any duplicate clues all get removed, and then only the unique clues are left. The person uncovers their eyes, and using those clues they have one guess to guess what the word is on the card. Super simple. We talked about this in our holiday gift guide because it was one of your recommendations. A game you can play with anyone. I've played this at family gatherings with like young kids and adults. It's such a fun game. You don't have to follow the exact scoring system. You can just play round after round. I feel like it's just one of those really classic, simple games you can play with anyone. I don't know if this will ever leave my collection, and anytime I go to a gathering that has more than 4 or 5 people, it's always one of the first games I think of to put in my bag because it's so compact, so quick and easy to teach with people who don't even play games. And I really like word games. Like I like word type stuff a lot, and this game makes you sometimes it can make you feel a bit stupid, but other times it can make you feel so clever when you came up with a clue and someone says, I didn't know what it was, but then because of your clue I got it, and you're just like, yeah, that's right, my clue on this for us. Such a fun game.
I think this fills the same niche for you that Codenames fills for me.
Right.
And like, and same thing, it's not on my list because I don't own just one and haven't played enough, and vice versa for Codenames, but I feel like both of us recognize that like they're just both phenomenal games, and just one is just such a great game to introduce. I've done it at like board game cafes with coworkers on team building things. It works so well. It's a great game.
Yeah. Cool.
So those are the picks for 40 to 31. So make sure you watch the previous video if you haven't already. I hope you watched it before this one. And otherwise, in 2 days from when you watch this, if it was posted when you watched it, we're going to have the next video and you'll get to see the next continuation of the list. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you soon.